the car itself, that's the brain as a whole structure, right?
Yeah.
That's the neurological aspect of it, like
Mhm.
the brain anatomy, the regions. But through cognitive training or cognitive processes like memory, reaction, decision making, we can make that car. So think about an engine. You tune up
Mhm.
the engine, make it more powerful. Guess what? The car you have will become faster. And but the thing is, a fast car doesn't mean a winning car because the driver has to be the one to execute the race properly. So that's you through life or through performance, through sport, whatever. Each part, you need a good driver, you need a good engine, transmission, all those things, and you need a good car.
So my guest today is someone that I met a little over a year ago, someone that is a fellow fitness professional colleague. He is an adjunct professor at Broward College. He is the owner and founder of Mind Body One and the newly renovated Mind Body One lab in Deerfield Beach, Florida. So I'm super excited to have him on the show today. Nick Davenport. He is a very, very densely filled mind for fitness professionals out there. And he's got a lot to explore, and he's got a great story. So that's why I have him on today. I'm super excited he's here. And as you can tell, he's wearing that Mindset Matters shirts. It just speaks to everything that he preaches. So I'm excited to dive in and learn more about his mindset. But how we doing today, man? What'd you do this morning? What's your day been like so far?
It's a pretty busy day. Weekends for me, like people say, can't wait for the weekend. Weekends are busy for me, is just like the week. So I was with a colleague of mine at the new, like I said, newly renovated lab. He was checking it out, and he did some tactical training with the brain range. We'll, I guess, talk more about that. And then I was with my daughter, and then yeah, so pretty much been all over the place. So here we are.
So, it's funny when we met through Sean, right? And Sean and Kira at the Sweat little Saturday morning exercise group. That was super fun. And it was crazy how we started chit chatting and we realized that we had a fellow connection too, way up in Boston area, right? With Gary Trottier, one of your like big supporters. He's a huge advocate for everything that you're doing because he's doing it with baseball players, right? So shout out to Gary. Maybe he'll watch this. We got to get him on the show. Um, what what does Mind Body One mean to you? How can you most efficiently explain that?
So I guess the main like short and sweet premise is I always wanted there to be no disconnect and not just words. A lot of people say the mind is important,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't really practice it. So my main goal was have an application to that very premise of the mind and body are one. Like cliche, I know everyone and their mom says you gotta have the mental aspect or the motivation or drive, but I'm the type of person, show me. And a lot of people in the not just fitness world, but just in general, didn't back it up with action. So the goal was to incorporate all types of training methodology, whether it be exercise science, neuroscience, psychology, spirituality. Like all those elements should not be negated. Not saying you have to be 100% in all of them, but
Mm-hmm.
Mind Body One was supposed to touch on which I deem, obviously, through my personal preference of what should be applied. And obviously, some people could have more of the other, but I kind of touch on all of them as much as I can. And some have more emphasis than other, but the goal was to bring all those concepts that make up mental uh, toughness, mental prowess, as it can be applied to not just physical performance, but just life performance in general. So that's the overall goal, making it all a unified thing so we can accomplish what we need to do in life.
You can be a more efficient and optimal human, right? Like
Yeah, because
at
every performance.
yeah, optimized performance, right? I know on your IG, right, it says we train the brain through the body, right? So I always try to tell, and you've probably mastered the ability to convey this to your clientele, right? I have a tougher. I'm still, working through those steps and figuring out how to get people to be captivated by the thought of me telling them we're not training your muscles, we're training your nervous system, and that's what I tell them. But I've lacked in the ability to make that more felt or make that more understandable and digestible for them sometimes. But this week, and you know, you always need some reminders, right, on like why you should be doing the small little certain things that, you know, if I was working in the lab with you, I would constantly be reminded every day. But if, depending on what your environment is and where you work, you have different training styles, right? So we had this guy come in, like I was telling you, and he was so in tune with just how everything should be connected and efficiently understood from that mind-body connection. Like he was, you know, talking about the importance of, um, you know, activating muscles just through light superficial sensory, and if that doesn't stimulate anything, or that doesn't cause any difference in performance or output, then it needs to be deeper, it needs to be more deeply stimulated. He was working on someone's scar and talking about the fact that it was the scarring tissue there that was impeding his ability to have full motor control over one finger at a time, because this scar here stopped the energy flow as efficiently and it scattered throughout the nervous system. Just diving like stuff into that kind of stuff was so cool, and it brought me back to and me and Haley were actually talking about it when we were doing all those different tests that you brought up at Sweat. We were in planks and tossing the tennis ball, right? You had to catch the tennis ball. You had to figure out what the math equation was, or if it was odd or even, and then you had to put it in a certain you know, bucket. So when you're training your clientele, what is the easiest way to make it digestible for them? How do you tune into somebody and say, and make them believe in the fact that this stuff isn't gimmicky like most of like the fitness world looks at it right now?
Well, I use an analogy. I use like basically a race car. So I usually break it down in tiers. So the car itself, that's the brain as a whole structure, right?
Yeah.
That's the neurological aspect of it, like the brain anatomy, the regions, the the engine, the different parts of the car, the transmission. That's more so the cognitive, meaning like the processes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the psychology, the actual behavior, is the driver. So using that analogy, the car being the brain, that's how you're built. Your brain is built a certain way. My brain's built a certain way. That's how we're built. We can't change that part. Directly you can, indirectly you can, but what we're given is what we're given,
Yeah.
right? But through cognitive training or cognitive processes like memory, reaction, decision making, we can make that car. So think about an engine. You tune up the engine, make it more powerful. Guess what? The car you have will become faster. And but the thing is, a fast car doesn't mean a winning car, because the driver has to be the one to execute the race properly. So that's you through life or through performance, through sport, whatever. Because you could put Jeff Gordon. I'm not a race car fan, but I know Jeff Gordon. You could put Jeff Gordon in a Toyota Prius.
Mm-hmm.
He's an amazing driver, right? He's one of the best in the game.
Yeah.
He's not going to win a race. That's a faulty car, or not a faulty, but a less performing car. Now, flip the script. Let's put like me or you. Well, I don't know about you. I'm not a race car expert.
Yeah.
I can
Definitely
obviously
not.
floor it, but I'm not an expert. But you put me or you in a NASCAR, doesn't mean we're going to win.
Yeah.
So when I describe the concepts applied with that analogy, it's like each part, you need a good driver, you need a good engine, transmission, all those things, and you need a good car. And that's how our brains work. So when we do my training, that's the goal, because mindset or the psychological aspect, that's the psychology, our behavior,
Mm-hmm.
our mannerisms, our personality, that's going to dictate how we utilize our brain. And how we utilize our brain, the car, is going to dictate how we go through the road or go through the race, which is life, sport, fitness, whatever. So that's kind of how I try to make it somewhat understandable, because we all know how cars work. And I hate to use like inanimate objects, but
Yeah.
they like, I use computers sometimes too, but I kind of veer away from the computer analogy sometimes, because even though the brain is kind of like a computer, the difference between a computer and a brain is a computer can only do what it's programmed to do. A
Mm-hmm.
brain, like you said earlier, it's plastic, meaning it can be changed.
Yeah.
Like I can learn a new way to think or learn a new skill, because the computer can only do if it's programmed to do long division, it's only going to do long division. And we're
Mm-hmm.
not like that, because if that was the case, we would be machines and we only would do one thing until we die. But obviously, we learn how to talk, walk, read, drive, love, kiss, whatever, and we grow.
Yeah, we're evolutionarily designed to grow and adapt, right? Through, like it says on the door behind you, neuroplasticity, right? Um, so one thing that the gentleman, Mikhail, was talking about was that our body, our brain has two jobs, right? And I was explaining this to my client this morning. Uh, job number one is to survive, right? Within the moment, like nothing else matters besides the now to the body, right? And within the survival, you have acute, fear and stimulation, right? So I always tell people, my clients, like, if your nose is itchy, that's great. It's going to bother you. But if I shot you in the foot, that's going to take precedent over your nose being in. Your nose is not going to be itchy anymore because your body's worried about being shot in the foot, right? So we pay attention to what we need to from a neurological standpoint. And then within, survival, we need three main things. We need oxygen, water, and food. I said this to my client this morning. Can you go a week without food? Yes. Can you go a week without water? No. Can you go a week without oxygen? Hell no. Right? So a huge way to influence the nervous system is through the breath, right? And through changing that oxygen level within your blood and this, that, and the next. And then the other thing that the brain is in charge of is movement. It is the computer system, like obviously you said not the best analogy, but it is
It's a good analogy. It's just
yeah,
it's
it is computing the brain and the bones and the muscles and everything to move through that neurological stimulation, that electricity being sent out through it. So he said the best ways to influence the brain are through exercise, through movement, right? And before that is through the breath. So he was preaching everything that you talked about, and then it was like, it was so funny. It's so crazy. What is like the biggest hump that you find you have to overcome with those people, with those clientels? Is it the psychological portion of it? Is it the belief in that it's going to work and benefit them? Or is it like the kinesthetic awareness that some people just lack and need to grow more aware of and self-aware of?
interesting question, because I would say from the kinesthetic side, not too much, because I work with a lot of more like high level like athletes and stuff. So that typically when they get to me, they've gotten all that out the way.
Gotcha.
So it's typically more so on the more of the mental side, because at that point, like if you work with a high level athlete, they've literally done probably more physical training than anyone on this planet. So like that's second nature to them. What
Yeah.
I've noticed just from my hands-on experience, research aside, just from what I've seen through my eyes, is a lot of them have like maladaptive behaviors when it comes to how they think. Like I've literally seen clients, I won't name who, but who have lost their cool doing some of my like simplest drills, like with the fit light or with the grids, not because they think they suck, because at the end of the day, my methodologies, they're like, not to downplay myself, they're kind of simple in the, like you've done a few in the presentation,
Mm-hmm.
but application is where it kind of goes away, because obviously if you do a math equation 3 plus 2, that's 5. It doesn't take too much processing. Anyone with a first grade education and up is going to be able to do that. But when I say you're attending to multiple stimuli left and right, up and down, doing something like running back and forth, trying to do another drill, but still having to fixate visually on this target and do the math, you only have 1 second to do it. Guess what? And I get more deeper why that's even hard. Now 3 plus 2 becomes a lot harder of an equation than it really is,
Yeah.
because now your brain's got multiple things to worry about. So those induce like fight or flight, like you mentioned with survival. That's why, like, so since we're on this show, I can talk more about this, because on IG I can't go too deep because it's only like a minute a
Yeah.
video.
Please
But
do.
I have a thing I like to use in my webinars, and I call it "There's no more saber-toothed tigers." So it plays on the premise what you were talking about of
Fight or
in
flight.
10,000 years ago, survival was the main objective. Like everything we do now is a byproduct of that. Like we go to the movement theory of like, okay, what's the brain for? Because I did a FAU had like a competition. It was like a TED talk kind of, and I was
Okay.
in the finals. And my topic was on how the brain and movement. And I started off with what do Donald Hebb, Sigmund Freud, and Arnold Schwarzenegger have to do with each other? And you're probably thinking that makes no sense. But the key word there is thinking, because Donald Hebb, he's considered the grandfather or godfather of neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yeah.
Sigmund Freud, considered the father of psychology. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, considered the father of fitness or bodybuilding, right? And all three of them have relevance to what mind, body, one is. So going back to the ancient times, our bodies adapted because to survive, we had to hunt and find food. We could walk up to 8 to 12 miles a day in ancient times searching for food and prey. So you're talking about a lot of physical activity. And while we were doing that, you had to be intuitive of your environment. You had to take notes of the tracks of the animal, the deer, whatever. And that was like cognition. So our brains develop to think and move, literally. So when we go to the no more saber-toothed tigers concept, it's like those byproducts, like how we go into fight or flight. If you see a bush shaking, and you think, is it a saber-toothed tiger behind there, or is it the wind? If it's a saber-toothed tiger and you walk by it, you get eaten. If it's the wind, you're okay. But it's safer to assume that it is a saber-toothed tiger and stay away, because if it is the wind, no love lost. And the name of the game is staying alive so you can prolong your genes. And we develop different ways to do this. That's where communication comes in, because once upon a time, communication was just to be able to alert each other of danger. But then we learned how to do stuff like lie or show like interest romantically to get what we need, because now we're communication so advanced right now that we don't realize how intricate it really is, because back then it was just staying alive. Now communication, like I can talk in a certain tone, a certain speed of my flow. I could be a little softer. And this could literally change how a person receives me and gives me what I want. And that's how our brain developed for like being attached to people. Because I don't know if you're in a relationship or not, but it's like being in love did nothing for you back then. Nowadays we can be like, oh, I love him or I love her. But love didn't keep you alive. Like you can care for deeply from like a sense of biological, like I need this person, my heart gets faster. But it's like now we get the benefit of saying, I won't die if I go outside right now and I'm worried about someone I love, because there's probably nothing out there that's going to jump out and kill me. There is possibilities, but it's like I can worry about that now. But now our brains have evolved to be like, we can still get into that fight or flight stage when it doesn't matter. And that's where this training indirectly goes, because it triggers those same fight or flight responses to less than lethal things. Because like I said, with my clients that get frustrated off of a fit light drill, they're not going to die if they get a bad score, but they act as if they were. And that's where a person who's going to fight someone in a UFC fight, or a person's going to go catch a ball on Sunday, if they do that in a game, that means defeat. Or in a fighter's case, a knockout. Or if a football player drop pass. So that's their equivalent to dying. And it's like, I'd rather them get more acclimated to that stressor, because people love to criticize me on, oh, that's not the same, or it doesn't carry over. And it's usually from people who don't get the point of what I'm doing. Obviously, doing a reaction drill or decision-making drill with my methods is not identical, but it's going to give the same mental state of pressure, anxiety, worry, because the brain regions simulated, like, for example, you ever had a bad dream or a nightmare or even a good dream?
Yeah.
And have you woken up, like, say there's a lion chasing you in your dream. Did you wake up, heart beating through your chest?
Sure.
Because your brain interpreted the stressor, regardless of if it was real. So that kind of throws out their whole, oh, it's not a carryover. Because guess what? That lion wasn't real, but guess what? Your body and your brain reacted as if it will. So we're giving you a safe way to interpret stress without having to physically exert yourself in a way that could hurt you, and then mentally adapt to it. So when you see it for real, your brain and your body has kind of been through it in a sense, because once again, our perception dictates the reaction.
Yeah. So I love that. I have this conversation pretty often, and it's great to be able to, it's so much better and more fun to have it with people that understand, you know, the concepts of it, right? And the ideology that everything we do is stress, right? And the brain is just adapting to it. But the thing that you hit on, right, was that people say, oh, it doesn't translate. Well, that's because everything we do, regardless of what it is, it does not matter. Everything we do and experience is unprecedented to a certain extent, because yes, I have sat in this place before and done a podcast, but it was with different food in my system, different hormones running through my body, a different person on the other end having the conversation, a different time of day. Yesterday was different for me. It influenced my ability to convey and be efficient in my thought processes today, right? So everything we do, although there can be similar patterns, is unprecedented. So for someone to be like, oh, well, it doesn't translate, is just, it just doesn't make any sense. They're not thinking in the capacity that then nothing we ever do would translate ever. You would never get better at driving. You would never, improve your motor capabilities to eat as a kid. Like, you know what I'm saying? So you have to just put yourself in similar type situations and create that nervous system stimulation, like you're saying, that emulates the same concepts that they may run into, so that in the future it becomes more second nature than a completely new experience.
Yeah, well,
So
that goes to, oh, my bad.
no, you're good. You're good.
Well, I was saying that kind of goes to the what you said, because most people stress and worry and go into anxiety mode because they're unfamiliar. So if you look at any failed performance, I believe in the sport, school, a play, whatever, it's usually because they weren't, like you said, they weren't presented with enough scenarios. Because, like you said, you sat there before, but you've done enough times that your brain and bias has adapted to the point that even though you can't have infinite interpretations, you have a lot that if something did go wrong, you have a better chance of acting appropriately because you've been here before. I actually use an analogy called the tourist and the resident. So imagine we went to France. I've never been to France. Have you?
No, I want to
Okay.
though.
So,
I am French, so.
oh, really? Okay. So say we went to Paris and we've never been there before. We went to see the Eiffel Tower. We went to see all the sights and everything. And as a tourist, you're probably taking a bunch of pictures. I'm doing this like they still use Kodaks and stuff. But let me be real. We're in 2020. It's this now. But
Yeah.
we're taking pictures, taking videos, selfies, whatever. We're excited. Oh my, I want to see this. And it's cool because, well, like you said, novel activity, something we haven't presented. Our brain, it reacts to that because it has to regroup and configure because it's never done it. So we're more likely to be caught off guard, not in a danger way, but more so as accommodating to what we're doing because we've never done it before.
Mhm.
Now let's go to the resident, someone who's lived in Paris their whole life. While the Eiffel Tower is great and everything, so it's one of the seven wonders of the world, right? Um, don't quote me on that. It might not be, but I think it is. But yeah, the Eiffel Tower is a great thing. If I've lived there my whole life, while it's amazing, I'm not going to get too moved by seeing that. Oh, I see that every day on the way to work,
Mhm.
right? So that's where stress is. You want to be the resident, not the tourist, because if you're in a fight or flight situation, whether it be life or death or a sport or school or whatever, do you want to be the guy like, oh my God, oh shoot, oh, what's that? Or do you want to be like, oh, I've seen that? Because that person's going to be able to slow it down. Because think about any stressful situation you've been in. It goes by like that, right? And he's like, what happened? It's not because it just was fast. It's the fact that you weren't able to perceive everything, so it just went by quickly. Usually, when you know what you're doing, it seems slower because you can take in everything, and you're like, oh, there's a tree there. There's a girl eating an apple over there. You're seeing things that you would not see if it was unfamiliar territory. And
So
and
I think a good analogy for that, right, is like you train UFC fighters. You talk to the average person who, gets into a fight. They're like, yeah, I blacked out. Like I don't really remember most of it. you talk to a UFC fighter and it's probably a whole lot slower and broken down. They can see someone's movement patterns and feel exactly where they're going to be moving. And if you were to ask someone who has no training experience and they got into a fist fight, they're like, yeah, I had no idea what that person was going to do. I was just freaking wailing and throwing. I don't really remember why I did that, right? So like it's a basic example. In the NBA, I was just watching an NBA game, right? Like LeBron's ability to slow the game down is just absurd. He sees everything for what it is before most people do, you know, and that allows him to make better decisions, to be more calm. I always talk about like the ebbs and flows of life, right? The frequency, it's natural that we have ups and downs, but you can't get too high or too low. And the ability to remain calm in stressful situations is the ability to move through it more efficiently and kind of optimally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about you know, your training philosophies and the little things that you do in terms of the lights and this, that, and the next, how do you come up with these things? Are they things that you're, you know, you have your principles of like, all right, we're trying to train this part of the brain and activate, you know, this part of the brain at the same time. So I need to, based on those principles or foundations, I need to, you know, use something that has color, or I'm trying to stimulate this part of the brain, so I need to use something that has numbers. How does that all come about to you? Because like some of your stuff is hitting on different things. So is it something that you learned already and just kind of took in and made your own, or is it based on some principles or your understanding of like different parts of the
It's
brain?
it's a mixture of both because there's so when I make any drill, I reverse engineer it. I start off at the end. A lot of people don't do this. I say, what do I want this outcome to be? Like working memory,
Mm-hmm.
decision making, reaction. And there's different types of reaction too. A lot of people don't know this. There's different facets to reaction that have like actual names, and so that's where my background comes into play. So when you ask, so I don't know if I had this when we first met, the Stroop effect when the colors don't match the word. So it'll be like red, but it's written in blue ink. Did you see any of that?
Yes, I remember
So
doing that.
so that's an example of a concept. So the Stroop effect is something I didn't make up. Stroop effect was made in 1935 by a psychologist named John Ridley Stroop. So it's named after him.
Okay,
So
yeah.
he took the concept of our brains have interferences. So he used language, but there's so many versions now, and I'll talk a little bit more of that. But the first one was colors. So he would have colors written in black, regular ink. So red, blue, red, green, and you would have to read through them as fast as you can. So say there's a list of like 20 words, color words, red, blue, green, yellow, purple, orange, whatever. And you would read them in black, and you would time how long it took you to read through the whole list.
Okay.
Then you do the second, that was the baseline. So
Yeah.
the second go through would be with the colors that are incongruent.
Yeah.
So red written in blue, green written in purple, purple written in orange. And you would do the same thing, say it's 30 words again, but like that. And you would do the discrepancy between, okay, let's say the 30 words took me 28 seconds the first time because they're written normally.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did it again, it took me 41 seconds because there's going to be a delay. Because what happens is our brain interprets language or easier than it interprets color because colors are abstract. So I always do this with my students at Broward, and I'll be like, describe red to me. Like pretend I'm blind.
Yeah.
And you know what they do? They'll be like, an apple, a fire truck. But I'm like, I'm blind. I've never seen a fire truck.
Yeah.
I've never seen an apple. So that's why it's abstract because when we really think about it, colors, you can't really, it has no true meaning. It's a hue of light. You know what I mean? So you can't really say, like a house is tangible. A mop, a broom. I'm looking at the corner and I have a mop
Yeah.
and broom.
Yeah.
So these are tangible objects. So even though I'm blind, I know what those are in theory because they have a meaning to them. Those words have meaning.
They
But red,
have a shape. They have a
yeah,
physical shape. Yeah.
red really has no kind of connotation in that sense. So that's actually a philosophical thing in cognitive psychology. Like the first day I took this class called Attention and Consciousness, which is deep on cognitive science and how we perceive. That was the first day we talked about that little thought experiment. Mary's blind and describe red to her. That was part of that. And we had a big debate about it because some people are like, well, you could, but when you think about it, it's abstract. So what happens is the region of our brain is called the anterior cingulate cortex, or the ACC. So what happens when we read those words when they don't match, it slows down the processing because it sees the word red, so language is processed faster. So it'll see red, but if it's written in blue, you're supposed to say the color. So you have to kind of, oh, blue. So if you have impulse control issues, you're going to be more likely to read it and say red than say blue. Now, people who have issues with the Stroop test is usually drug addiction, ADHD, and other like mental disorders like that. So this is another analogy I use for that. So if you own a dog, right? Let's say the ACC, the one that's part of the interference and processing. So backtrack a little bit. The ACC is more so over like reward and like saying when I do something that I need to do, it inhibits me or it allows me.
Yeah,
so that's why someone who has a weak ACC region in their brain would have trouble impulse, because what's happening is the reward is like saying, do it. You need to do it. Versus someone like maybe who doesn't have the deficiency, they're like, hold up now, that may not be the best. So that's why I use the analogy of the dog owner and the dog. So the ACC is the dog owner, because the owner knows the dog shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. Bad boy, right? The leash, the actual leash connecting the owner's hand to the dog, is the prefrontal lobe. That's where humans, or not just humans, but we have the more advanced prefrontal lobe, process, rationalize, make decisions. So that's saying, okay, I know I shouldn't do this behavior. So using fitness, don't eat the cake or whatever. Yeah. And then the dog is the behavior. So I want to eat the cake. So if you have a weaker ACC, that's like you letting go of the leash.
Okay.
Word. So that's kind of how. So the Stroop test, I know I got to deep in the Stroop test. So I use the Stroop test in my own way though. So that's why you asked, do I come up with this? So that's an example of me adding on to something I learned. But then I do come up with tasks that I made up myself. Like I have one called fit arithmetic, and I think you did it when the color equaled a number, and you had to do a. So what you did in the play, that's fit arithmetic, because you had to do a processing, add, and it dictated the color. So you put it in the red bin. So that's fit arithmetic. I created that concept. So I have some that I derived from like the Stroop effect, but then I have some that I came up with myself. So I guess long story short, I tell people who are trying to come, because I get a lot of DMs, I say, do your due diligence. You don't have to do like me and get a degree and this stuff. Obviously, that's the best route, but you don't have to. But if you want to save time, just make sure you're versed in the core concepts of cognitive science and psychology, because that framework allows me to like eyeball things like, I can make a drill out of that. Because people, like, I got a guy who hit me up the other day, like one of my shooting drills with the tactical. He's like, how do you come up with this? And I'm like, I took a task that already existed and said, no one's doing it like this, and just made my own spin on it. So since I was rooted in it kind of goes back to our stress concept. Since I'm so familiar with it, I don't got to put too much thinking into it, because I know it. Versus those that are like, hey, this is cool. It looks cool on the gram. Because I have people I see do that, and I don't call anyone out, because that's not my place. But it does frustrate me, because it's like, you probably don't mean bad, but that's why the gimmicky stuff comes up, because I get lumped into that, because you can't explain why you're doing that drill. Like the Stroop task, I just explain why we do that. But a lot of people do the Stroop task because they've seen someone do it and it looks cool, but it's like, if your client says, why do we do it? Reaction. No, not reaction.
Those key words that people throw out, right? Those key words that people throw out. It's like in fitness when people say tone, like, oh, I want to tone. It's like, hold on, like that has no backing. There's no scientifical like backing to that word whatsoever. Yeah, it's a buzzword, exactly, right? So it's like activate your core. I just like activate your core is like one of those like buzz phrases. Activate your core. Okay, but how? Why? What is that going to do to benefit? What is going to be, like you say, reverse engineer it? Why tell someone to activate their core when you can tell them the action to take, like an exhale, to actually stimulate external oblique activation? It's like, well, they don't know that, so just tell them what they should do to make that happen. Same kind of sound, like, right, reverse engineering it. So how did all of this stuff, what drove you to even go to school for all of this? Like, when were you like, I want to study neurological science. Like what?
Uh, that's an interesting question because since a little boy, I always was a how and why type of kid. And I know for my parents probably was annoying, but it low key set the foundation because I always like I'm an athlete, tried and true, but I was a nerd too. Like in sixth grade, I think sixth or seventh grade, I used to do science experiments for fun, just for fun, not for school. I would literally do like dioramas and science projects just because. And people who see me now, they like think I'm a know-it-all or something. Like, no, I've always been like this. It's not
Yeah.
like I'm trying to sound a certain way. Like I can name all 45 presidents in order because I actually loved that topic in school and I did competitions on presidents. Like there's competitions on presidents. Yes, there was in Broward County. And I actually was one of the top in Broward County for that. I think I got second. But yeah, so going to why I got into it in the college, my first year. So I went to Bethune-Cookman University at HBCU up in Daytona Beach, and they did have exercise science, which I wanted to do. They had PE, which I knew wasn't the same, but I figured maybe it's closer. So I signed up to be a PE major, physical education.
Yeah.
So my advisor, because I was an athlete, I ran track in college. My athletic advisor, he put me in physics track, not physical education, physics. So me not knowing better, I was in a whole bunch of classes that I didn't even need. I was in calculus. I was in because I was partial academic and partial athletic. So I had to take a heavy load because most athletes take the bare minimum. All my teammates were taking the bare minimum. I was taking like 18 to 21 hours, you know, and still competing and going to practice every day. So
for some insight, what did you play?
I ran track. I did the long and triple jump.
Okay.
So I was a
just
jumper.
so everybody knew and understand. Yeah.
That's yeah. So yeah, I'm the guy who runs fast towards a pit of sand and hits the board and jumps.
Yeah.
That's what I simplified. I'm actually pretty good at jumping. I don't know if you've seen in my videos doing like jumps.
I don't think
post
I have.
But I posted one a few months ago. See if I still had it. It was like a 56-inch hurdle hop off to like a drop step. And people are like, dang. I'm like, hey, there's a mental, but I still got that muscle in my name too. So physics. So I was taking a bunch of classes that I didn't need. And this dude really screwed me over. And the thing was, being a freshman, I didn't know how college worked because in high school, you literally everyone has the same curriculum.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to, but in college, you pick your curriculum. So it has to make sense to your degree. So I had like maybe 2 physical education classes, a few like calculus and advanced this. And I was bored out my mind in the physical education class, PE classes. So I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do this. So I went to my academic advisor because we had 2. We had academic and we had athletic. Well, if you're an athlete, you're athletic. So she said, what do you like? I'm like, I love history. So going back to like the president stuff. So I said, I love history. So what made you do history? So I switched to history, bored again. Because while I love history, it as a major, at least who I was getting taught by, I had a few good ones, but it was boring. Yeah. And I would fall asleep in class, not because I was tired. And I'll get to why I did that because this is going to be a surprise for most people. But I switched again. So I was like, so it's major 2. So I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling it. So my academic advisor was like, well, we need more black male teachers. Why don't you be a history teacher? So switch to social science education. So you'll still do history courses, but you'll be able to teach. And I'm like, well, I guess that makes sense. So I switched to social science education. So major 3. So with education, you have to take 2 psychology classes. So the first one I ended up taking was called developmental psychology, basically the growth through lifespan of how our brain and our behaviors develop. So I had a professor, Dr. Ian Payton. This man, whether he knows it or not, he has a big reason of where I'm at right now. So Ian Payton, he is a British fellow. He taught the developmental class. And after class one day, I think it was like the second or third class of the semester with him. And he was like, I was like, I love this stuff. I was considering psychology. He's like, yeah, you should do it. And I honestly was leaning towards it before he said that, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. So for the 4th major, I picked the winner. I switched to psychology and stuck with it. Now, while this was happening, so while all this is going on, all these major switches, I actually was kicked out of school during this time frame. I was basically on academic probation because I slipped because, remember, I put in all these physics classes. So why this comes full circle, right? So while I'm in all these physics classes, I failed all but, I think, 1. So my GPA was a .88. my first semester.
Damn.
So all these major switches was happening. I was actually kicked out of school, and I had the petition to come back, and I got granted on probationary status. So I found what I love to do, psychology, and I ran with it. And from then on, I didn't get straight A's, but I brought my GPA up, and I ended up graduating with a 2.4. And long story short, there's a lot that went in between there, but basically, it was like I was seeing like indirectly what would come mind by the one because I had to take all these different classes because with psychology, I can speak on other majors. There's so many aspects of psychology, and our curriculum, how it's built. I took classes in the physiological psychology, like the brain, how it affects behaviors. I took in human sexuality, cognitive science, clinical psychology. So I'm getting all these tidbits. So when I graduated with my bachelor's, I didn't know, once again, for advisement, I'm like, so what do I do now? So my first job out of college was I worked at Sears Auto, not as a mechanic, but a sales rep. So, you know, hey, you need brakes, man. You need to get oil changed. So I did that for 2 years while I was studying to be a personal trainer. So that's where my fitness kind of comes in. So I would be at Sears Auto between clients, reading books on fitness, exercise physiology, reading books on mental health. And my manager, Jerry Grogan, hit me up about 3 years ago when I started taking off my mind. By the way, he's like, dang, I knew you would get here because he used to have to yell at me. He's like, we got customers backing up. You're reading books on mental health? But it led me down the path because I went to do my master's right after I left Sears. And I became a mental health major for therapy, to be a therapist. And once again, I hate to keep repeating myself, I got bored because
Hold up 1 second. 1 second.
Yeah.
Where did you start to do your master's?
Barry University.
Barry, okay. Yep.
So yeah, so I got bored because it's like, wow, psychology has so many facets. Therapy is just one of them, and most people in the field and out the field don't know there's more than just how do you feel. That's not what it's about. So I had a classmate named Nicole Smith. Now she definitely doesn't know this because I don't think we follow each other anymore. I don't know why. I don't know if she deleted me or we just fell out. But she said something that changed my life. She said, "You probably would like sports psychology." Because you're a former athlete and you're into mental health. And I'm like, really? What's that? I've never heard of this. Is 2012. So I've never heard of sports psychology up to this point. I'm 23 at this point. So I'm like, what's that? He's like, well, I got my master's in it, but it's no money there. I told her, I'm like, but it sounds interesting. So he's like, I wouldn't do it. So she already had her master's in sports psychology and now she was doing mental health. So I did the reverse. I left mental health and went to sports psychology. And the thing was, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And then something crazy happened. I got in a crazy, not fatal, but a very bad car accident. And I was fine physically for the most part, but I had no transportation to go to Miami. I'm living in Wellington, so that's like an hour drive.
Hell yeah, Wellington's far.
So I had no way to get to school, so I had to drop out. So once again, I was out of school. My plans then shifted. So in that year between then and there, I was working at LA Fitness.
Okay.
As a fitness trainer director. So basically I was doing that and I ended up leaving there and venturing out on my own, doing like, you know, stuff with all my own, like kind of like how you do, like you had your own thing going even though you're still working with a company. So basically I said I need to get back to it. And then this time I had started dating who would become my daughter's mom, and I went back to school. And within 2 months into school, the semester, back in sports psychology, I'm doing great. I'm getting good grades. I'm getting A's on my, so mind you, 0.888. Remember that?
Yeah.
And I'm getting straight A's, right?
Yeah.
In a master's level. So this is what you're talking about growing up. So she tells me she's pregnant. So once again, guess what I did?
Dropped out.
Bye-bye school. Got a job teaching as a substitute at a high school, Monarch High School in Coconut Creek, where my mom works, doing what I got to do as a man. And once again, dream was on pause. And I'm like, I'm not miserable, but I definitely ain't happy because I thought I was finally where I needed to be. Like doing what I want to learn. I loved all the classes. I was never bored. And even the classes that were like on statistics, I still was interested because I knew it had to do with like exercise science and sports psychology. So basically I put the dream on hold once again, trials and tribulations aside. And then I was like, man, I need to get back to it. So my daughter was maybe a month to come. So I found an online school. Well, it's an online program. The school is a real school. So the name is kind of crazy because it's actually I think a Division II school in sports, but it's called California University. But it's in Pennsylvania because there's a place called California, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So they have an online program for sports psychology for masters. So I'm like, dang, but I got to start from scratch. So I'm like, you know what? I like challenges. So I start from scratch again. And my daughter was born, the day she was born was the first day of classes. So I'm in the doctor's room or the delivery room in the dark because her mom and her were sleeping. I'm in the corner in the dark on my laptop writing my first discussion on my class I'm taking. And lo and behold, regardless of the situation, I used to, like, throughout that degree program, since it was all online, I would, like, have my daughter with a bottle like this while writing a research paper at the same time. Like, this was common. Like, it was cool because I was able to, like, take care of her, and she didn't have to worry about, like, babysitting or daycare, and I still got to do my degree, and I was still working and doing other side things. I did internships. So a lot of this was going on, but where Mind Body One started popping its head up because I was finally finishing sports psychology, because I already knew I'm going to take this to another level. It's more than just what I'm learning. I need this foundation, but I know there's more to that. I didn't know how. Yeah. So within that year, 2014, when my daughter was born, my great-grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So in 2015, she was on her last leg, basically final days. We didn't know when, but it was coming. One of my best friends, so I know I'm jumping all over the place. So one of my best friends who was running track, I ran with track in college. He was training for the 2016 Olympics. And I was helping him with his strength conditioning and his sports psych work. So I was doing both. So you see where it's getting, where Mind Body One's starting to come closer.
Okay.
So we went up to Claremont, Florida, which is in like Central Florida area. And the meet got postponed because it was raining hard. And my great-grandma lived in Ocala, which is about an hour north. So my mindset was, I got my daughter, I brought her with me. So me and my daughter drove up to Claremont. We're going to see the meet with my friend, then go up to Ocala, pay our respects, and whatever. So the meet got postponed. So it got put to like 6 o'clock at night. So we didn't finish till almost 10. So by that time, it's too late to go see her. So I went back home, and I was like, maybe I could try to go up there next week. But guess what? Next week did not come, for her at least. And for some reason, at that very moment when she died, I was like, wow. So about a week or so goes by, the funeral comes, you go up there, and I'm one of the pallbearers. So we put her in the ground, and I'm just thinking, like, wow, it's a tough time, everyone's sad. And I was sad, don't get me wrong. I'm not like, whatever. But my mind's thinking, like, at the funeral, I'm like, Alzheimer's is a pretty serious disease. I don't know a lot about it, but I know it involves the brain. And I love this mental stuff. So I start reading research articles upon research on the brain, Alzheimer's, and ways to not treat it, but, like, help with the symptoms. And exercise was one of them. And that's where this neuroplasticity where it first got presented to me. And I'm like, wow. And around the same time, you're like, dang, what all were you doing? I got a job at an addiction center doing something called neurofeedback, which deals with EEG headsets and brain waves and bidding in right brain states. So you physically change the brain through this process. So I'm learning this as well. She died, inspired me. And I literally said, you know what? Fitness, strength conditioning was once what I wanted to do, but I always had to have the mental side. I literally walked away from that because I said, I'm done with this completely. And that's when Mind Body One started slowly becoming more into the picture. But the thing that would cap it to make it exactly what it is was with the same addiction center. I basically had the owner was like, I want you to make a program, because he knew my background in sports psychology. He was like, I want you to make a program that integrates physical and mental. And he said, we'll call it the mind-body connection. So I'm like, cool. So I wrote a little overview, like 2-page long. He's like, I love it. He gave it to like the board, and they're like, okay. But then what happened, there was a audit they were going through, so they had to put it on the back burner. And just my luck once again. So, dang, I forget so much part of this story because I skipped over. One more plug. While this was happening, like remember I was substitute teaching. I got a job teaching full time as well. And I actually lost that job while all this was going on too. So I got a job and lost a job while this was going on.
Yeah.
And I was working at Target. Grandma died, and then we broke up, me and her mom. So all this was going on. So at the Addiction Center, that was the first sign of hope that, okay, I can make this program mine. I can get paid more, but then it got put on the back burner for a year. And one day I was like just struggling. I was pretty much living in a little warehouse type facility. I was training people in, and it was like, man, I need to hit him up. And I was like, hey, Dr. Harris, he's like kind of like a mentor to me. I was like, I need some help. And I told him basically what was going on. He's like, dang, that sucks, because he's like a mentor. So I had no problem telling the personal side. He was just like, but what do you expect me to do? Like, I can't just say, here's $1 million. Yeah. So I was like, I don't want a handout. Remember that program? Let's get it started. So we talked pricing and stuff, and what he said was, since you have a master's, I can pay you basically kind of like a therapist, but prorated because it wasn't a full-time gig. But the money was good enough that I could start making strides. And I did that for like 2 years, and I was doing sessions that had mental skills like motivation theory, teaching the clients addiction center about mental toughness. And then the other half would be little drills that integrated fitness and thinking challenges. And that was literally the first. This is 2015, 2016, the birth of Mind Body One. Then that's kind of what led up to this very moment. I know it's a long story, and there's still more parts, but that's what led up to exactly what we grow and become all of this.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because people think that like everybody who's doing something like this, an entrepreneurial, venture, was just like out the womb born with this thought, like, this is what I want to do. And just like it was clear and concise. And that's why I love this, is because like, for one, I didn't know half of that. You had given me some backstory, right? And to just hear the amount of no's that you heard, the amount of pauses, the amount of obstacles that you like overcome is crazy, because there's no easy path. Anybody is not just going to be handed some shit. And even if they are handed some shit, no one cares about that story. No one respects that story. Right?
Let's look at what's his name, Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace.
Yes.
Look at he's a perfect tribute to what you just said, because no one knew what he was going through. And he made like, I think 11 movies during this 5-year period when he's going through terminal cancer. I think stage 3 when he found out. So it was already in an advanced stage when he found out. He put out not just 11 movies, most of them were action movies. So it's like he's doing stunts, he's in super shape, and he's going through chemo at the same time. So like you said, he could easily subside it right then and there. And when I heard that, I identified with that, because not to say when celebrities die it means more or less, but it's like hearing his story, I could identify with that, because granted, I'm not going through that, but it's like he showed that you could take it as a loss and be like it's over, or you could fight. And he definitely fought. That's like I said, I fought my way as well, because I could have said, dang, I lost my job. Dang, I got in a car accident. Dang, my grandma died. Dang. I had a lot of reasons I could have said no. And I practice what I preach. That's why Mr. Mental Muscle, people laugh, like, oh, that's a catchy name. But that really is who I am. Like, not to be like extra and be like, oh, I'm Mr. Mental Muscle. But I live it. And doesn't mean I'm impervious to stress or anxiety.
Or emotions. Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, mentally tough people, it's not that they don't feel stress or anxiety or worry, it's that they feel it, but they're able to stay composed and see it as a challenge and overcome it. Because using my tactical guys, I work with Navy SEALs. These guys get scared. They get nervous, but know what they do? They're trained, and just like I try to train my clients, they're trained to see that danger and still go, knowing that there's a risk, knowing there's a failure and their failure is the ultimate failure. It means they die. So who are we to complain as, oh, my failure just means I get an F on a test, or my failure means I lose a basketball game. Okay, life goes on, because I hate to be cliche, you either learn or you lose, but you choose what you do.
That's what I was gonna say, is you can look at your obstacles as a dead end, or you can look at your obstacles as an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to learn, or even not just your obstacles, but the emotions that you're feeling. Those very emotions can be learned from. The only way that you would have came on here, or the only way that Mind Body One in and of itself, right, can fail is if you stop doing Mind Body One. Because what is the failure of Mind Body One? What could that even be described as? Because that depends on what your definition of success is for it. If this is what you love and this is what you're passionate about, then doing it is the actual goal. That's the actual reward, not anything else on the business end of it, not the income, not the financial gains, not the this, that, and the next, that people often will say, oh, it failed, or that business failed. It's like, well, the only way we can fail at anything is if we choose to quit and we choose not to look at it and reflect upon how we can learn from it, right?
You know the rapper Big Crit? You heard of him?
Big Chris?
Crit, Krit.
Nah, Big Crit, no.
He has a song called Boogie Miles. Boogie Miles from the movie on Friday Night Lights. So there's a
Yeah.
song that he says, you made me think of, he said, you got to play into the end. The only difference between a winner and a loser, a winner plays until he wins. So it's
Oh, yes.
like Big Crit slept on. He's a big artist. He came out around the same time as Kendrick Lamar, and they've made
Okay.
songs together, but he didn't get as much mainstream love because he's very country. He's from Mississippi. But when I heard that line, you got to play to the end. The only difference between a winner and a loser, a winner plays until he wins. Because that winner's going to fail way more times than the loser does.
Yes.
The only difference is the loser stops after the first or second try. Like failure is not.
It brings me back. It brings me back. Sorry to interrupt, bro. It brings me back to when I was a child, bro. I had all older brothers and sisters, right? So we'd be in the driveway. We'd be playing basketball. So we played knockout, right? Or we'd play one-on-one, or we'd play horse. Bro, if I lost, I was like, nah, we got to play again. No, we got to play again. No, we got to play again. Until I beat my brother, I was not comfortable with going back inside. I couldn't stand it. I was like, nah, I can't walk back inside knowing that I just lost and like didn't try once again. It's funny. And that's where your shirt comes in, right? Mindset matters.
It does. That's the part of my business that I don't give enough personally attention. I've been doing better lately. If you see my posts, I give a lot of more mindset stuff now because that's something that's always been a part of Mind Body One, but I never emphasized it as much because the more of the cognitive conditioning drills caught more fire as far as popularity.
Mm-hmm.
But the mindset stuff, I preach that. So another side note, when I was going through all those trials and tribulations, I was working with a professor, Dr. Ryan Sherman. I'm actually going to be on his podcast in 2 weeks. He's a personality psychologist. So personality psychology is kind of my forte. So when I do those drills, the reaction times and all those scores, I look at those definitely because it gives us a tangible measure. But
metric.
I low-key I analyze more so also things like their mannerisms, their self-talk. So I can count eyeball like a profile of different type of athletes because the personality aspect plays a big role too. Because when people talk about personality, they talk about it in a way that's very colloquial and they don't understand what personality really is.
Mm-hmm.
Because people look at it very finite, like either this or you're that. Like if you've ever been on a dating app, they have people like, oh, I'm a INJ, like INFP. Those are like called type theories. Type theories are kind of like debunked now. They came out in the early 1900s. Almost every psychologist nowadays collectively agree they're not as accurate because personality scales are on a spectrum. So, like for example, the most popular one, extroversion versus introversion.
Yeah.
So people get confused with what those really mean. They think it means, well, I'm extrovert. It means I like to talk a lot and be social, and introvert means I like to be to myself. No, what it really means is I find more. I get more energy and belonging and feelings from social scenarios, and I recharge better from those. And then introvert, I recharge and get more energy from being in more isolated, in a sense of not loneliness, but things that project what I'm personally trying to accomplish. So it's not like one or the other, that which most people say, oh, I'm an extrovert or I'm an introvert. No, it's a spectrum because in different scenarios, just like with what I do with my drills to performances in sport and military, whatever, you're going to be both of those depending on the situation. So let's use police officers. I'm starting to work with more police now, law enforcement. There's times where they're going to be in a car for 8 hours with nobody. But that 15-minute portion where it's a call, they have to be extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you can't be one or the other in those scenarios. You're going to be both. Yeah. So it's like, we don't live in this finite black and white world when it comes to personality, because another factor, there's something called agreeableness. So there's many different personality theories, but the most widely accepted is called the Big Five. I don't know if you heard of the Big Five factors.
No.
So the Big Five, the acronym to remember is OCEAN. So, or OCEAN. O is for open to experience. C is for conscientiousness. E is for extroversion. A is for agreeableness. And N is for neuroticism. Now, they made a new one called Hexaco, but I won't go into that one because that's a little more intricate. But basically, each one dictates a different type of personality trait that will shape how you interact. So let's use something like agreeableness. Yeah. Agreeableness, let's say in romance, for example, someone who scores high on agreeableness trait, meaning they're higher on the spectrum, will be better in relationships because they're more likely to hear opposing views and not get flustered by it because they're more open to it. Versus someone who's low on agreeableness, they're going to butt heads a lot. So when I look for a job or a mate, like dating apps or a employer or whatever, these traits can speak volumes because if I know how they are as a personality standpoint, I can place them in scenarios and understand. And that's why we do it in research. We can predict, like corporations pay big money to these personality psychologists, like my mentor, Dr. Sherman, to help them be able to predict if I got 5 candidates, who should I pick? And this is not as simple as what those dating apps are using, like, are you a rainbow or are you a leprechaun? Like, no, that's gimmicky pseudoscience. But if I could say that Dylan scored, it's usually 1 to 5. So say you scored 4.6 on agreeableness, and your job, let's say the job is working with groups, and say your other competitors for the position score like 2.9, I'm probably gonna go with you because it's showing that if you were put in a scenario where you had to work with a lot of diverse people, you're probably, for the most part, because personality is very constant. So people say, does personality change? And the science says no. And they're like, what? But people do act different. Yeah, behavior change. But think of it like this. This is a great analogy I like to use. Think of it like, I got it from my mentor, Dr. Sherman. And he said, think of it like if I threw a ball and I was like, think fast. Are you right-handed or left-handed?
Right.
Right-handed. So let's say if I threw a ball quick, fast, you're probably going to instantly do this because that's your dominant hand. Yeah. Now, you can still catch with your left hand, but for the most part, this is what you're going to default to, and that's how personality is. So if I'm typically an extroverted person, doesn't mean I can be introverted, but in 9 out of 10, I'm going to be the extroverted person. An extroverted person can stay in and watch Netflix or read a book, but that's not what they're going to want to do. They're not going to get their energy from that. Like, you ever heard someone be like, I can't stay inside? Yeah. And they'll be like, what? What's so hard about that? And I don't knock those people. You know why? Because I understand, because that person, their brain, so when we get to the physiology, their brain is getting more receptors from, say, dopamine and serotonin because it's wired to get that fulfillment from social scenarios. Me personally, people don't believe this, but I'm more introverted. But they like, I could never tell. I was in St. Louis last week. Oh, yeah, you know that. I was in St. Louis, and the lady who brought me out there was like, you're introverted? I'm like, because she asked if I was going to do anything after she dropped me off to my hotel. I'm like, nah, I'm probably going to stay in my room. She's like, really? And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty introverted. She's like, what? I can't believe that because how you talk so passionately what you do. I'm like, that's where you got me. Introverts typically are excited when it's something they care about.
Yes.
So it's like I can talk like this, how we're talking, for hours. You know that.
Yeah.
When we met, I think I talk like this. Yeah. But in this scenario, I'm like this. Chilling. I'm not.
Which goes to explain, right? When you said that you would be in a boring class, you just disconnected, right? Mm-hmm. That speaks to personality.
Well, part of that too is ADHD. That's the part I saved for the end. I found out about ADHD when I was 30 because I was never diagnosed as a kid. Mm-hmm. So I went through. So this makes sense why I failed so many classes. I'm not dumb, but I literally could not focus. I would fall asleep because I wasn't getting enough stimulation. Yes. So going to I got A's in classes I like. History, A's. Writing, A's. Science, D's. Math, F's. It's like my parents would think like, you're not applying yourself. But they didn't know. I didn't know. At 30 years, I'm 31 now, but at 30 years old, I was at a conference and neuroscience was watching my mannerisms. They're like, have you ever been tested for ADHD? Mind you, this person didn't know me like that. They we're having lunch together because we were a group of people, and I didn't know them like well, but I kind of clicked with them, so we're having lunch. And he just asked, and mind you, these people study the brain much more deeper than I do because they're neuroscience. They're more so on the physical structures. I'm like, no, I don't have ADHD. Why? It's like, you're showing a lot of the traits because I have a bad habit sometimes of like not twitching, but like you can't see it because like I usually don't have my hands in videos. I do that actually on purpose. I don't know if people don't notice. And I guess it's me kind of opening up about this. I typically try to keep my hands out of videos because I'm always moving them. Same thing with my feet. So I'll try to keep it from like here down so you can't see what I'm doing. Because it's like I had someone jokingly comment, but they didn't know. And they were just making fun of it. Like, you're kind of like Kevin Hart because I was doing a lot of this. But Kevin Hart doesn't be funny. But I wasn't doing it to be funny. So I kind of like peeped it. I'm like, I didn't even realize I did that. But after watching old videos, I'm like, I do that a lot. So he just was noticing how I move, like I'm always scanning.
Yeah.
So it's a superpower because it helps me focus on things I want to do. But when it's things I don't, it's a detriment because now it's like it'll take me like 4 hours to clean my room. It won't even be that dirty. And I'm like, dang, where do I start? It's like, so when I found that out, it's like that explains a lot. But dang, I wish I knew earlier. But I developed my own mechanisms to deal with it because people say you have great like when my drills, I do great at my own drills, and people are like you're like the master. But I was like, well, it's not for lack of trying because I
Yeah.
have to try harder. So there's something called working memory, which is usually something people with like different cognitive disorders or ADHD, whatever, they have trouble with. That's being able to hold information temporarily to decide what to do with it. So I do it this. It's not like sad. I'm not saying violent story, but I, a lot of times where I will forget where I'm going because
Mm.
in the moment, because working memory is in the moment because it's the
Yeah.
ability to take what's happening now. Like right now, you're using it to listen to me and you're factoring it in the moment to generate what you're going to say back based off of what you're hearing and what you already know in long-term memory. So working memory, that's what's called working memory because
Yeah.
it's taking all the different memory facets to put them together to formulate a solution. Because if I say what's 2 plus 2, you're going to say 4 because you're temporarily holding 2 plus 2. It's going to the hippocampus, which is long-term memory, and then
Mm-hmm.
saying, wait, you know that's 4. Bring it back, 4. So me, that's why I did bad at certain subjects like math. People with bad working memory typically do very bad at math because not because we don't get it, it's because we temporarily going to flip flop, mess up things, and I would get F's not because I was doing it wrong, because I was doing the wrong problem. So let's say I did 7x times 2 plus 4, it'll become 4x minus 2 plus 3 or something like that. So
Yeah.
I'll do the work. Like the teacher would literally write on my paper, you did the work correct, but the problem changed. Like it'd be the same problem, bring it down, same problem, bring it down, different problem. And I would fail.
That's
And
crazy.
the teachers never caught this. And I'm looking back like, why did no one ever check this? Like, you
Lack
know,
of education, man. Lack of education. It's crazy. And I always try to say, like, if there's anything we need to be more educated on, it needs to be the understanding of our anatomy and our brain and our nervous system and how to master it. Which is why I love everything that you do, because that's indirectly how you're educating people on their ability to influence their own neuroplasticity. So speaking on the whole ideology and what you were talking about, right, with the working memory, the hippocampus, the freaking long-term and short-term memory. Last night with a bunch of my colleagues, we were talking about deja vu and how it feels so real, right? You're like, nah, that definitely happened before. I've experienced it. I know I did. But I was trying to tell them, I was like, nah, it's not. It's not like it's a brain lapse in electrical signals, and it's a synapse malfunction where you're taking in information and it's shooting it to the back of the brain first, right? It's bypassing the short-term memory. It's hitting your hippocampus, and then it's coming up into the frontal lobe, right, which is your short-term memory. And that's where you're processing it. And because it's coming from the back, your frontal lobe automatically thinks that it's happened before. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
as far as that aspect, I wasn't familiar with the deja vu
Really?
to that extent. But how you explain it, it makes sense because the hippocampus is where we store long-term memory. So that kind of makes sense. So I personally was familiar with that explanation, but how you explain it, it makes sense
So
because like
that's what I learned. That's based on some readings I did, and actually it was in class we talked about it one day. Someone had asked a question and we like dove into it as a class in college. But it's so funny because we think it's so real, but I was trying to explain to them, I was like, when's the last time you had deja vu and you knew exactly the day and time that it happened? I was like, I've never experienced yes, I've had deja vu and I've been like, oh yeah, no, wow, that's so weird. I feel like that happened before. But you can't be like, no, that happened in 2015 in April. I've never heard anybody who had deja vu and they were able to pinpoint the timing and the date of it. And I was like, that's the proof in the pudding that it hasn't happened before. It's that it's a relapse. And I learned last night when we were looking at it and reading up on it that it can actually for people with epilepsy, it can be a signal that happens. It's a precursor. So people will have deja vu, and then they'll have their epileptic episode. So crazy. And it just goes to show everything in terms of like neuroplasticity in the mind, how sensitive it is, right? How it's really just electrical impulses. It's no more than, you know, phone wires running all through our body and our brain. And I always think of it like dirt roads versus paved roads. When you said earlier, if I threw the tennis ball at you, you'd catch with your right hand. It's because that road is more paved than the other, right? This is the dirt road, your left hand, this is the paved road. Well, I'm going to choose the paved road. It's easier to drive down, right? It's quicker. So I always think of it like that. But it's there's just so much. I mean, we could talk like this for hours, bro.
Well, definitely.
It's
Right.
crazy.
Yeah, the one more point on that, what you talked about with the deja vu thing, made me think of like false memories because we have these deep, like the neurons are basically where the memories are stored, the pattern of neurons. So I always explain this lightly. I won't go too deep into it, but it's like we create these recollections because not with deja vu, but just real memories in general. It's a recollection of the last recollection. So when you have a memory, it's those neurons firing again. So technically, the memory is really just a recollection of the previous recollection. So that's why we sometimes distort memories, not because we're just passive or liars, whatever,
Yeah.
but it's like the last recollection gets weaker because the less you recall the memory, the weaker the signal is, and vice versa. The more you recall a false memory or a distorted memory, it makes it
More
stronger. So
becomes real.
that fish was this big, it came that big, not because you're just a liar, it's because at some point you told it a certain way, and the next time you recollect it, it was still that big, and you recollected, well, it was a little bit. So it's like we only, and this goes back to like we talk about stress management, motivation, any of that stuff. It's basically that, like I said, it's paved roads because now you made that memory. Now, say that memory is of how to perform a certain way, a certain mindset, because that still goes in hand with that. We're recalling, or in this scenario or this stressful situation, I respond with this type of, of thought process. And guess what? If we practice these processes, just like we can practice proper behaviors, proper strategies, we can practice improper behavior, improper strategies. And that's why people are like, oh, I just can't do it. It's like, yeah, but it's because you've only learned how you can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's obviously more intricate than that, but that goes into the how the synapses and the neurons fire to create these memories or create these responses because that's what like goes back to what I said with Donald Hebb. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Yes.
So we keep firing these same processes and patterns. Like the first time you rode a bike, the feel not the physiological aspect, but just the feeling. Let's say how you felt. Every time you recall that, it triggers. But just like that, you can have the same thing about the first time you failed the test. Two different types of behaviors and outcomes, but they become stronger the same way by how you recall them. If you always attribute that test to "I'm not smart," guess what? You teach your brain that you're not smart. You're not this subject. Because you ever hear this? You probably do. You may have said it. I used to say it, but I stopped. Oh, I suck at math. No, it's not that you suck at math. Because let's listen to this logic. You never hear this though. Man, I suck at reading. No one says that. Know why? Because you can suck at reading, you can suck at math, but you beat yourself more for math. You know why? Because it's common, it's more acceptable. No one will say I suck at reading because you know why? If you say you suck at reading or you can't read, you're called stupid.
Yeah.
So but think about it, we control that because we can easily, just like we say we're reading, I'm never going to say I suck at reading because I don't want people to think I'm dumb. But we say it about math because it's more acceptable to say I suck at math. But at the same time, it's the same mindset. But why do we do it? Because that's where the sociological aspect comes into it. But it's like we have that power.
Yeah, we have so much power through our language. Like you said, right? We recognize and we're more in tune with language at a faster pace, right? That's what you were talking about earlier. Like you read in black lettering, then you're quicker with it, right? Than reading something that is whatever. But we recollect with language and with words, and people limit themselves so much with words. Like, oh, I could never do that. Oh, I can't wait. I need, right? When you say I need, and then you say some useless shit, like you're really just reiterating to your brain that you need it in order to survive, and you're just limiting your capabilities or your capacities. So it's so funny you say that, because I try to teach that to people all the time, and I'll like type out "I can't wait" and I erase it. I'm like, nah, I don't want to say that, because then everything in the middle of where you are now and whatever you can't wait for just seems a little less significant, right? It's crazy. So, I mean, you, like I said, we could freaking go on day and day. Just proof that, one, I got to come see the facility, and two, that we got to do this again and dive even deeper into it. But what before we wrap it up, what is the major place or the major kind of arena that people can find you and learn from you via social media or your website or anything like that?
So social media on Instagram would be the easiest. Obviously, I have a website, but the follow day to day, because I'm always putting content out at
Okay,
Mr. Mental Muscle, MR Mental Muscle.
cool.
So at Mr. Mental Muscle, follow that on Instagram. You get daily
Mm-hmm.
something, maybe
So,
motivational, maybe science, maybe just my life, doing what the heck I do every day.
and then the Mind Body One account too, right? Got your
So yeah, that's the bad thing about it is I use the Mr. Mental Muscle way more only because that gathered a bigger following. So
okay.
for that purposes, I use it way more. Actually, I've been slacking on the Mind Body One account. I don't update it as frequently as I should. So that one too, the Mind Body One is
Cool.
the company website, but you're getting the same content either way. Just
Oh,
I'm frequent on Mr. Mental Muscle
yeah,
because
I'm the same
as I'm
way, bro. I'm this way. It's hard to manage two different profiles and followings, and I do most of mine on my personal one. Um, with that being said, bro, I want everyone to go follow and just, I mean, he's, like I said, his brain is dense with knowledge. That was the first thing I said, right, earlier in the podcast on the introduction. Proof is in the pudding. He could sit here and talk more and more and more about all these ideologies and theories and ways to train and become more efficient, better humans. But with all that being said, it just starts with learning and just caring and being passionate about yourself and being a better human. I think he portrayed that pretty well. So, what is one quick tip from a lifestyle perspective or a mindset perspective that you can give to people that they can take action on? One quick thing to pay attention to, or one quick thing to implement into daily life that can help change their mindset.
So this one's very simple since we live in a day of technology.
Yeah.
I try to do a minimum of learning 10 new things every day. And I usually exceed it easily
Well,
because you may like, what does that do with anything? But when you learn new things, it gives you more experience because
yeah.
I'm not well traveled. I've been to other states, but I've never really been around the world. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm well traveled in my experiences through learning. And people sleep on this. So just go on YouTube, purposely look up something you don't know about, and go on a like binge for like 10 minutes. And that'll get your quota of 10 new things in a day easily. And this going to open your mind to be more creative, more understanding, because now you're going to see things you never would have been like, I didn't get that. So learn at least 10 new things. However you do it, YouTube is how I usually do it. But read, whatever, but try to do credible sources at least. But
Yeah.
yeah, learn 10 new things every day.
That's awesome. I really like that. You guys
And
heard it.
neuroplasticity, it does help with neuroplasticity as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's
You learn, you create new pathways, right? And then with that, you're adapting and changing and evolving your perception. And once again, that spectrum, you're creating a larger spectrum for you to view life on. That's awesome. Yo, you guys heard it first. Follow the man, check him out, support him, likes, follows, reviews, anything you can to help get his message out there. It will be greatly appreciated. I'm super excited, bro. I wanna come check out the facility, do something with you at some point. So I appreciate your time. I'm super grateful for everything you just spilled out here, including your story and all the tidbits of information that you gave out. Super helpful. I I like the whole 10 new things per day. Just that's super simple, right? Like you said, super simple. Gets the job done. with that, let's chat soon. Let's catch up, and we'll set up a day and time for me to come through and see the place.
All righty, most definitely.
Sound good? All right. Appreciate you guys for listening. Appreciate you, Nick, for coming on and sharing everything with everybody. Until next time, be limitless. Peace out. What's up, LT Tribe? DFOS here, just to express my gratitude and say thank you for tuning in and continuously commenting, liking, sharing, and subscribing to the episodes and the content that we are bringing you. It is helping so much. Once again, I want to say thank you and hope you have a great rest of your day. DFOS here. I know y'all understand how much of a nutrition freak I am. And when I heard the world's most nutrient-dense food, you know I had to tune in, listen, and get learned. So I need y'all to check out the LT360 podcast I did with Catherine Arnston, the founder of Energy Bits, an algae-based nutrition company. It is not a supplement, it is a one-ingredient superfood, and it is recognized as the most nutrient-dense food on the planet by the World Health Organization and others. So go check out energybits.com and make sure to use the discount code LimitlessTheory at checkout for 20% off. You will not be disappointed because you will have the most nutrient-dense food in your pantry in the world. Go check it out now. Peace. If you're anything like me, you love free 99. That's why I want you to head over to thelimitlesstheory.com/free. I dedicated this portion of my website to specifically give you free tips, tricks, resources to check out and use for free, and also give you an opportunity to support other small local business owners like myself who have often already been on my podcast and you may already know. So head over to thelimitlesstheory.com/free to see what free 99 can do for you. DFOS here to tell you about my new favorite kitchen appliance. And no, it is not a pan or even a utensil, but instead it is my new Pure H2O water filter. It sits behind my kitchen sink. It removes up to 97% of chlorine from my tap water and 77 other contaminants. We know that our bodies are made up of 72% water, and there is a strong connection between the quality of the water that we intake and the quality and longevity of our life. So we have to make sure it is the cleanest and purest water we can get. With Pure H2O, I know that every time I turn my sink on, I'm getting the best and cleanest water possible. So if you want to learn more, head over to thelimitlesstheory.com/shop and you can learn more about Pure H2O. I'm sure you will not be disappointed. Adios. DFOS here with another important sponsor. This one is awesome. It is a way to get high quality meat delivered straight to your door by Bristelli's Meat Market. It was established in 1976. They are now a global leader in the highest quality meat. And it is awesome. If you are an unfranchised owner like myself, you can earn anywhere from 22 to 27.5% IBV on your orders. And if you are a customer through shop.com/limitlesstheory, you can also earn cash back every time you buy your high quality meats for you and your family. Not only can you get filet mignon and burgers and chicken, but you can also get salmon and tuna and shrimp and even a combination of regular meat and seafood. So make sure to check out Bristelli's, but most of all, check out shop.com/limitlesstheory to learn more.